So this little chapter is called The Sister Wound. And it's disappeared again. And this was all the stuff that that got me interested in Red Tent and how I found it. So here is my story. You might want to grab a cup of tea and come back. It's a little long. The Sister Wound. Women cannot be trusted. At least that was a story I was very used to telling myself. At school, apart from a couple of close female friends, my mates were mainly boys. You could say I was in the popular crowd, but I never felt like I fit in there. It was full of bitchiness, cattiness, and gossip, a really easy and enticing trap to fall into. You see, you either agreed or were the weirdo. The quickest way to bond with many of the girls in my school, especially the ones that were worth knowing, was to pack together and talk about the others. I found myself on both sides of that fence during my 5 years of high school and quickly learned that I couldn't really trust the cool kids. Whilst being part of the pack was seemingly safer, I could only really trust myself, even though I didn't actually know who I was. It left me with a lifelong wounded that led me to believe that whenever I was in a group, especially of women, that they hated me, disliked me, or thought I was an oddity. I capitalized on that in my mid-teens as I dressed in my Doc Martens, combat trousers, and leather jacket, and listened to the bands that no one had heard of. In truth, it was a front. If I can make myself weird, then it's not me that they're hating, it's the idea of me. Still, in the crowd or out, I was convinced that people were looking at me in a certain way or were bitching about me behind my back. After all, life had proved that to me over and over again. Working in the motor trade, my whole adult life had given me two sides of another coin. Often the only girl in the group, I faced the jeers and the jives, which I responded to with quick-witted humor. It was a gift. This was how I established myself, and it kind of worked. Somehow I felt safer surrounded by all the guys who were what they were. I knew where I was with them. I could create good stories around them. When I started my next job, I had to face it all again. In a building full of women, I walked into a new team. They seemed nice, but my old voice talk came back, telling me that they didn't really like me. I was too much, too loud, too quiet, too annoying, too experienced, too strange, too different. It's interesting noticing how you behave when you think no one likes you. Me, I responded with turning on my confidence mask and hoping that no one saw through it. I allowed my humor to stop anyone really getting too close. Now, when you act like you're super confident and know what you're doing, but inside you feel like a fraudulent failure, interesting things start to happen. People respond to you in a way that doesn't feel congruent with how you think you are. It contains a lot of pressure. You make up stories in your head that are annoying at best and dangerous at worst. It felt to me like an act I had to keep up because now it had gone too far, and that is tiring. Was there something else deeper going on here? It turns out that we as women had been pitted against each other for centuries. In modern day, we see it through our movies. We feel it through the meme girls, the cackle of women coming together, the expectations we have of each other, most of which unachievable and contrary. Only a century ago, women were forced to turn against each other, to turn each other in, to mistrust. In many places, it was a crime for women to gather in more than pairs. In others, we were asked to be the eyes of authorities to report suspicious behavior. When suspicious behavior could be determined as a bunch of women coming together laughing, or even worse, having an intelligent conversation, it's no wonder so many of us are left cautious, distrusting, and acting the way we often do. We all find coping mechanisms. The old, if you can't beat them, join them adage worked for me for some time, whilst the bitching and the gossip might have left me with a moment of superiority. In truth, it just left me bitter and paranoid. How could I trust anyone when I couldn't even trust myself? I wonder sometimes which side of the fence I would have been on during the burning times. The truth is, I think it was both. It is hard to stand up to the crowd, no less if your life was on the line. For centuries, we were taught it was safer and the right thing to do to report anyone who has an opinion that differs from the church. So here we are, in the safest time for centuries, still acting as if being in our power isn't safe. Yet now something is different. Back then, we were severed from our communities, our villages that were made up of women, midwives, healers, crones, and the wise ones, coming together and raising the tribe, working with our local medicines, our local plants, sharing our wisdom and the responsibility of childhood and parenthood, of life and death. It is amazing what one generation of distrust can make us forget, let alone countless. The damage was done, and many of us haven't ever experienced this kind of community in our lives. We live in separation. We don't trust. We give our power to authority who we believe know what's best for us. Our gut is telling us it is not safe to trust. Our brain is telling us we must. Our primal instincts are screaming, it is not safe. So we are confused, and we do what it is we know best to do. We survive. And that survival sometimes comes with a bitterness that is hard to swallow. The memories of the tribal world before are starting to leave our cellular memories, our mothers, and their mothers not having that experience. Reading how to raise children from a book written by men, taught to hush down our mother's intuition and our need for sisterhood because it's not right, we can't trust it, it doesn't exist. And then we are left to deal with that in an ever separated and fast-paced world. Turns out there were other people like me that deep down saw through that. There were other people like me who were also so tired of wearing the mask. There were other people like me that were living so far in their masculine that a part of them was being called back. There were other people like me. It's just none of us knew about each other. We didn't even know it in ourselves. And so the cycles continued until some years later, I met someone who told me about this group she went to called the Red Tent. It focused on women coming together during the new moon to share how we feel and do some activities, maybe read a poem, make things, sing, connect. I wasn't so sure. My initial thought was that I couldn't think of anything worse. It sounded a bit, fake and uncomfortable, yet something convinced me, and she asked if I would keep her company, so I agreed to go. I remember sitting in the circle. Some candles were lit to honor our ancestors, ourselves, and our children. At that time, I had just had my third child. He was only a couple of weeks old during my first meeting, so I held on to him like a safety blanket and thought, well, if it all gets too much, I can always blame him and leave. But something happened. When the talking stone came round to me and I was asked what I wanted to share and how I felt, something rose within me. No one had asked me how I felt, really and truly, in a long time. I hadn't considered how I felt. I was just getting on with it. I didn't even know what to say, so I tentatively dipped in and I asked myself the first time in forever, how are you today, Melissa? I found out that there was a lot going on under the surface of my new mum hormones that needed this outlet, that needed this connection, that needed this unfiltered, uninterrupted talking to rise from me. Words were leaving my mouth like I was in confession. I offloaded, and all the other women sat around me and held me in my vulnerability. Something happened when I heard them, all the other women sharing their hearts and souls, and I found something in me too. Compassion, non-judgment. For once, I didn't have to give them an answer to solve their problems, agree with them, find my Me Too story, or break the silence with a joke or smart comment. Something was happening. Something was healing. Over the months that followed, it became what I needed, the place to go that somehow made the rest of the month seem easier. I finally understood what it meant to have a sisterhood, a group of women that held, shared, laughed and cried, rejoiced and mourned together. No judgment, no bitchiness, no competition. I had found my tribe. I had found a resource that awakened something in me, and I began to heal decades, if not lifetimes, of sister wounds that I didn't even know that I carried. I think that every county should have a red tent community or something similar. For me, it helped me honor and relish my womanhood. It helped me normalize my periods, my body, my hormones, and my feelings. It helped me to trust again. If every county had a red tent, I truly believe many of our issues will be resolved. Sisterhood is something to be cherished. It is something that we need through our childhood, our menarche, our motherhood, our menopause, and all the spaces in between or skipped. Here is where I learned of the maiden, the mother, and the crone, and saw the magic in them all. The three phases of womanhood: the maiden, innocent, full of inquisitiveness, freedom, intelligence, bursting into life of exploration and expansion. The mother, the giver of life, the nurturer, the manifester, the creatrix of life itself as she blossoms into adulthood. The crone, the wise woman who has lived and learned and grown, a vision of safety as she assists us while we transition and learn and wander through life, guiding and watching over us, soothing and encouraging in perfect measure. Here is where I stopped fearing the judgment of others. Here is where I found a part of me that I never knew existed. Here is where my divine feminine started to stir, awaken, and feel free enough to show her face. Here is where my masculine could finally take a break. Here is where great healing happened. So, dear reader, I recommend finding a sister circle, a red tent, or making one of your own, and honoring the concepts of this space. We share with no judgment. We listen with no advice. We hold each other with no expectation. We allow all of us to be. And what happens in the red tent stays in the red tent. Sacred, supportive sisterhood. It is a game changer for sure. So that, my lovely sisters, is a excerpt from my new book, Memoirs of a Mystic in Training, which is available right now on Amazon. If you'd like it, look up me on your Amazon account or get in touch. So thank you very much.